A terrible darkness descends upon the galaxy, and we shall not live long enough to witness its passing. For nearly 4 decades, Warhammer has entrenched itself in our lives, becoming a truly widespread cultural phenomenon. Although not everyone engages in painting miniatures or memorizing all Astartes legions by their designated numbers, such ardor is often deemed a mark of madness, even among fans. Many can recall encountering individuals, ignorant of the setting, yet strangely invoking the Emperor and calling for the collection of skulls into a grand pile before his throne. Today, Warhammer 40,000 stands as a deep, well-developed universe, eclectic and referential, yet uniquely its own. It has spawned so much content that fully exploring it could take longer than the setting has existed. Despite its variety, the grim world of the far future has long been defined by unique visual markers, allowing even those far removed from the setting to unmistakably identify its nature. Space marines, chain blades, colossal space cathedrals, runes of the chaos gods, an atmosphere of apocalyptic desolation, grandeur and eternal warfare, these have long become inseparable elements of Warhammer, often serving as muses for other creators in different realms. Yet, it was not always so. What once bore the name Warhammer 40k, in the waning years of the 80s, let us say, diverged quite starkly from the vista we behold now. In this Voxcast, you will uncover why the Ginstealers might venerate the Dark Pantheon, why Huron Blackheart found renown surpassing even that of Abaddon, and the purpose behind the Imperial Fist's engagement in coprophagy. Well, let us address the paramount issue forthwith. Indeed it was the doing of those very Imperial Fists. And no, it is no longer deemed canonical. At the very least, one harbours hope in that regard, for, compared to the other events chronicled within that tome, the coprophagy performed by the Astartes seems but a curious bonus. This occurred within the book by Ian Watson titled Space Marine, published under the nomenclature Inquisitors of Space. It may be articulated that this book, from the epoch of the first edition, is at best transitional. Therein, the process of becoming an Astartes and the embedding of implants were delineated with considerable detail. Specifically following the integration of the second stomach, neophytes of the 7th Legion were compelled to consume decaying corpses, doused in a source of excrements. Evidently in those times, the Iron Warriors harboured a significantly weighty reason to disdain the Sons of Dawn. Overall, the tome is quite amusing, hence it is recommended to all. As of the current day, it elicits a wild amalgamation of unrestrained laughter and inexpressible horror. So if any of your acquaintances are followers of the Imperial Fists, here is a new way to annoy them, no thanks required. If you are a follower yourself, the origins of this matter do not lie with me. I neither conceived nor wrote it. Back in those times, the Adeptus Astartes bore little resemblance to what we have grown accustomed to. Today, they are the Emperor's Angels, humanity's finest warriors, with an ancient history and a repertoire of well-known heroes, each celebrated for their resilience, loyalty and nobility. However, in the 1980s, it was somewhat different. They resembled techno-barbarians more closely, cruel, wild, often insane and merciless not only towards humanity's foes, but towards humanity itself. Indeed, the Imperium still has its share of such chapters today, like the infamous Flesh Tearers. Back then, the image of a pompous and noble ultramarine battling for Macragge with courage and honour wasn't entirely absent, but it certainly wasn't the archetype. The Astartes of that era were more akin to thunder warriors in demeanour. For instance, encountering a squad of space marines serving as mercenaries for pirates or rogue traders in the current Warhammer setting might be conceivable, but would be seen more as an unbelievable tale. Moreover, the encounter would not involve a squad, but rather a single Astartes, likely another Alpharius or Fallen, unaware of their Primarch's return. Back then, such occurrences were almost commonplace. Did you notice that in the artwork from that time all Space Marines donned the Mark VI Corvus armour? That, as I understand, was the sole variant of power armour available then. The iconic Aquila pattern armour only emerged in 1993 with the second edition. Interestingly, those times witnessed an odd situation with the now standard dreadnoughts. Now, a Space Marine dreadnought is an ancient warrior, grievously wounded unto death, yet encapsulated within a life-sustaining sarcophagus. This sarcophagus is secured within a war machine, thus granting the Astartes warrior a new form to continue his duty to the Emperor. In ancient times, the principle was much the same, with one exception. Placement within a dreadnought could occur not just due to injury, but also by command. This was not deemed a punishment or such like, merely that the squad required a heavy unit of fire support. And with the last dreadnought fallen in battle, congratulations, brother, we shall sever thy limbs and entomb thee within the dreadnought sarcophagus forevermore. But fret not, thou shalt now rain destruction upon the foes of humanity with a mighty assault cannon. Yes, the old law was, in places, far darker than what we have today. Now such practices are undertaken chiefly by the Chaos Space Marines, for whom entombment within a dreadnought sarcophagus is one of the most fearsome forms of punishment. As for the Chaos Marines back then, they were simply less developed in the lore than they are now. The concept of the ruinous powers was forged long before the era of the 40k, originating within the fantasy realms of Warhammer and transitioned almost unchanged. It was just that, in those days, they lacked unique miniatures, such as the Iron Warriors. And among the traitor legions, primarily only the Black Legion of Abaddon was represented. In the bygone days, the Horus heresy, that grand tapestry of treachery, was not yet enshrined within a tome-laden saga, detailing the events and personages such as Garviel Loken, who now stand even more recognized than those of the 40k. Indeed, it was not heralded as the seminal catastrophe in the Imperium's storied history, but merely served as the foundation for why the Chaos Space Marines exist at all. Truly, in those ancient times, we possessed a greater understanding of the Badab War than of the heresy. Huron was a commander more coveted for one's forces than Abaddon. The factions of the galaxy, too, were in flux. Take, for example, the Tyranids. While already a swarm of insectoid devourers, they had not yet ascended to the status of an unstoppable scourge upon all living, emanating from the darkness beyond the galaxy's edge. No, they were very much a sinister yet hidden portion of our cosmos. Many of these creatures bore a more anthropomorphic guise, described as being so adapted to the void that the surface of a planet was an anathema to them. This portrayal starkly contrasts with the ever-adapting, voracious swarm we face today, consuming all in its path. In the epoch of Warhammer's first edition, the Tyranids even commanded a race of slaves. Known as the Zotes, these centaur-like beings were bred for warfare and interactions with other species. Yes, in those bygone times, one could even negotiate with the Tyranids. However, by the second edition, mention of the Zotes vanished into oblivion, and by the third, only a few lines remained, noting that they were consumed by the very Tyranids they served. This recounting is a testament to the ever-evolving lore and menace that shrouds our galaxy, a galaxy perpetually at the brink of oblivion, with ancient secrets buried beneath the currents of war and the march of the Emperor's will. Nevertheless, they were reportedly seen aboard the 7th Obsidian Fortress, so they have not vanished entirely. The Djinn Stealers too have evolved. Here I cannot assert with certainty, but as I understand, by the time of the first edition, they were already mutating into cults of gradually degenerating mutants into monsters. Yet there were no mentions of their connection with the Tyranid hive mind. Thus, nothing prevented you from utilizing Djinn Stealer cults as chaos cultists with corresponding rights and regulations, and in the law there were no contradictions to this. Just imagine a pure strain Djinn Stealer with claws coated in venomous ichor and flaking flesh, or that same Djinn Stealer adorned with feathers, tendrils and eyes, hurling clumps of warp fire. Nonetheless, this possibility was sealed off in the second edition, firmly linking Djinn Stealer cults with the Tyranids. As for the Eldar, they remain a paragon of stability. Truly, as they were the dying race of space elves, so have they remained. Except that in the older editions they were not as haughty towards humans and could even crossbreed with them, giving rise to half Eldar, who for some reason were not immediately exterminated in the Imperium. Recall the renowned Ilian Nastasi, a half Eldar who was not only spared death, but also accepted Astartes implants. becoming the chief librarian of the Ultramarines. Reflect upon this: a half-Eldar, a Psyker, the chief librarian of the Ultramarines. Imagine the visages of Marnius Calgar, Uriel Ventris, Cato Sicarius, not to mention Gilliman and Yvraine, as they hear such blasphemy. Yet besides this, the Eldar have remained unchanged for decades. Even many of their miniatures were only recently updated. Throughout the 90s, the zeros and the tens, anyone desiring to field or collect the warring banshees had to resort to the late miniatures from the first edition. Nevertheless, the half-Eldar are not the sole absurdity of old Warhammer. The Harlequins of that era were considerably weaker. It was noted, for instance, an episode where a Harlequin force destroyed a Genishdealer patriarch, but could not escape the lair, as the remaining cultists simply bludgeoned them with rebar. In modern editions, the cultists would have merely adorned the interiors with their corpses. And then, the Chaos Eldar. Yes, such beings existed. Those Eldar who succumbed to temptation and served the ruinous powers became champions of Slaanesh. Today, this notion sounds like heresy, even by the standards of heretics. However, I could find no official artwork on this theme. Perhaps the authors themselves realized the blasphemy they were penning. Or maybe I simply did not search thoroughly enough. As for the Dark Eldar, they simply did not exist. They were not introduced until 1998 in the third edition. The Necrons appeared a year earlier, in 1997, in issue 216 of White Dwarf magazine, and they only had a full codex received in 2002. In the primal editions of their lore, the ranks of the Chaos were bolstered not by mere mortals, but by androids of Chaos, whose visages bore a sinister resemblance to the familiar Necron warriors. These were not merely machines of war, but possessed constructs wrought by the squats that had fallen from grace into the embrace of chaos. Yes, those very squats, dwarves of the 40k who were ultimately expunged from the annals of the galaxy. Indeed, Games Workshop has since resurrected them under the moniker of the Votann League, though the sagas and chronicles of their deeds remain scarce. Yet in their original conception, the squats were undeniably the dwarves of the Warhammer 40,000 universe. Ostensibly part of the Imperium, they were but nominally so, claiming a vast swath of the galaxy as their domain. Should ambition have seized them, they might have waged a formidable war against the Imperium itself. Described as short of stature, stout and enduring beyond the limits of mere humans, these squats were beings of exceptional fortitude. Rarely exceeding 1.5 meters in height, they bore their beards with pride, waged relentless wars against the orcs, harboured grudges with unyielding memory, and delivered vengeance with inevitability. Parallels draw themselves ever intertwining with their own essence. Despite the relatively well-defined and intriguing lore bestowed upon them by Games Workshop, they have either been forsaken or deliberately purged from memory. Initially devoured by the Tyranids, their central worlds now lie in ruin, torn asunder by the Great Rift. The reasons behind such a grievous slight against an entire race baffle the mind. However, we have now been introduced to the League of Votann, of whom little is known. On Necromunda, they are referred to as squats, said to have arrived on colossal vessels from those very central worlds now engulfed by warp storms. Yet certainty eludes me, and I hold my tongue, awaiting rightful tomes to grace my understanding of their true nature. If the Eldar were once considered paragons of constancy, the Orcs stand as the unyielding pillar of the cosmos. Verily, their lore has only expanded, adorning the core of their faction with new facets without altering its fundamental essence. There was a time, perhaps by Orcish standards, when they bore the semblance of diplomacy and reason. Before the onset of war, they coexisted in a tentative peace with the squats, engaging in trade. Over the span of nearly 4 decades, Warhammer 40k has undergone a transformation inconceivable. This change has permeated not only the lore, but the very atmosphere that breathes life into this universe. Cast your gaze upon the early artistry that embodies the spirit of the 80s. Behold the inaugural visions crafted by artists like John Blanche, where the soul stirs to the sound of guitar solos rather than the solemn choirs and organs of the ecclesiarchy. Verily, heavy metal encapsulates the spirit of the venerable Warhammer in its most succinct form. Not thy modern power metal with its Sabaton and Powerwolf, nay, 'tis the hallowed riffs of Judas Priest and Iron Maiden. The Warhammer of yore was a realm less steeped in solemnity. The primordial edition was veritably crammed with references and precursors destined to be cast aside in the future. While a character such as Sly Marbo might be perceived as a humorous, albeit harmless reference, the Inquisitor Obi-Wan Sherlock Clouseau perhaps ventured too far. Indeed, in the modern era, such a move might well summon the ire of litigious entities over copyright infringements. Behold, there was an attempt to claim the very word monster as a mark of trade for an energy concoction. Moreover, the atmosphere then was less grandiose. The collective power level of the characters was markedly lower. A mere mob of cultists could potentially overwhelm a named Space Marine hero or an Elder Harlequin with sticks. And as for the musings of the authors of that epoch, that is a saga unto itself. Seriously, consult the writings of Ian Watson. Exactly that volume. In truth, the first edition can scarcely be deemed the Warhammer with which we're now acquainted. The setting in its entirety had yet to crystallize, and many elements now inseparable from it had not yet come into being. It might even be asserted that Warhammer 40k was truly birthed only at the terminus of the year 1993 with the advent of the second edition. In that singular moment, he transformed into the entity we now behold, but let that be the end of it.